Start taking.
Hello, welcome to this first presentation that I have for you on the material that we're reading and looking at. Um, I am going to talk to you about this online text, this book that's in the public domain. The copyrights run out on it now. It's called Life in a Medieval Baronry. Um, and a baronry, of course, is the land over which a baron or an aristocrat rules. Kingdom, land of the king; baronry, land of a baron. Of course, in a feudal society, the first thing we need to realize is it's a pyramid type of a society where for the most part, your position in life was kind of fixed from the beginning, depending on where you were born. So that's how feudalism works. And I don't want you to get confused either that this book, we're going to be talking more about culture, both culture in a kind of, entertainment, clothes, food, but also what we call material culture, the things that humans make and build, right? The castles, the weapons, um, you know, religious rituals and festivals and things like that are culture too. But there are also these physical parts of our culture, what we call material culture. So all of that's included in this. And another note too that I want to make about this book, it's old. This was written in 1923. Okay, so some of the language is going to be a little bit dated, even the way in which they describe. For example, I'm looking at uh, a quote here in the opening pages where it talks about the medieval age as being a mostly dark age, but you can begin to see um, uh, promise and light overcoming the ignorance of the dark ages. Historians don't talk like that much anymore. We find that kind of talk to be at best, I suppose, patronizing, and at worst, insulting to the people of the past. The people in the Middle Ages, or what we will refer to in this class as the medieval ages, were not any um, smarter or less smart than we are today. And they didn't have, as you'll read in chapter one of the textbook this week, once it comes in, hopefully, you'll learn that in medieval times, until quite recently, people didn't really have this idea of continually improving our society through technology and science, right? They haven't yet discovered the scientific method. So keep that in mind as well. And in fact, historians don't really use this term Dark Ages anymore to refer to this time between the fall of the Roman Empire around 400, 500 CE, and the beginning of the modern era, at least the beginning of the scientific revolution in the 1700s. There was actually a lot going on in the medieval period. And some historians have even argued in recent years that the smaller size of kingdoms that arose after the fall of Rome and these feudal estates, that it was the competition between these smaller states that would eventually give Europe an edge over the rest of the world, because large empires tended to be more stable and they didn't have anybody to compete with. But if you're living in these smaller feudal estates, uh, then you're going to be looking to compete and do things better, and sort of win against your neighbors. So we can talk about that a bit later, but that's just one theory of how important this period of history really is. Our notion of the modern university system also begins in this period. This is a period, of course, of the great Gothic cathedral building, these huge cathedrals and churches that soared above the skyline. and could be seen from miles away. You know, they may not seem as impressive to us today because we have huge built up cities like New York and Chicago, with giant buildings that also can be seen for not hundreds of miles, but for tens of miles away on clear days. This is a feudal age, as you see, the era of the feudal estate. Now, this book considers the specific part in the specific castle in northern France. There's some French words in here. Don't let them surprise you, but you should be aware of some of these phrases as well. There's a lot of words, for example, for a lord, a seigneur. That's Signeur, a seigneur. That's lord. Seigneurial dues. Those are the dues that you pay your lord, for example. Be aware of these words. A fiefdom. A fief is a tract of land over which a baron rules. A vassal. A vassal is someone who must be loyal, swears loyalty to a king. So the baron, in a feudal system, remember everything's a pyramid type of system, but the king of France, for example, would have underneath him all of these aristocrats, all of these barons, and sometimes we would have other titles, these seigneurs, and they would operate, though, in their little corners of the larger kingdom, as little kings in their own right. That's why this feudal system, was also very unstable. We even get the word to feud. We turn feudalism even into a verb, and feudalism means the political system of the feudal estate, in this system that I'm explaining to you, with the king at the very top in a kingdom, and then all these vassals. Those are the people that are loyal to the king, such as this Baron Conan that you're reading about in chapters 1 through 3 of Life in a Medieval Baronage. And you read all about this castle of St. Alakis. It's quite a fortress. You'll read in chapter 1 about its history. You'll learn a little bit about the Vikings, who were laying siege to many places around Europe, and even to an extent outside of Europe. They went all the way to North America, across the Atlantic, all the way down to parts of what is today the Middle East and the Black Sea area. So they come in their dragon ships, and they plunder, and they bring back their treasures back to their home bases in Scandinavia and in Northern Europe, but eventually they also will set up colonies of their own, and then they will also slowly be assimilated into the culture. And that was what seems to have happened largely here in northern France. And castles were built in some places to protect themselves from the Vikings and from other marauding groups. You're going to be reading about the Germanic tribes and their attacks on the Roman Empire at this time, for example. So feudalism relied on a system of patronage and deference. You pay patronage. You are loyal, and you expect people to patronize you, not in that negative sense that we might think of patronize today, but that you deserve, right? You deserve things. And in turn, people should defer to you, right? In these seigneurial villages, which were these feudal estates with the seigneur on top, if the signor rode his horse through the field, the serfs or the peasants at work were supposed to stop work and bow to show homage, to pay homage to the signor, to the lord. This is an era when physical strength is valued. And those who thought to be the strongest, and oftentimes they were, just because of their diets, were the aristocrats. Charlemagne, as you'll learn, was something like 6'7". He's a big guy at a time when the average height of an individual in this part of the world, was only about 5'4". Shorter than that, I believe, for women. But this was often a matter of diet. There was a difference between classes, between the social orders, as we call them, because peasants often didn't get enough protein when they were children to grow. Physical strength was appreciated. Swordsmanship, jousting, the idea of going berserk. This is kind of a Viking idea, something that you do in battle when you just let your physical rage and emotions overtake you. So all these are part of this era. Now, this fiefdom, if I can use that word, that you're reading about, this Castle Alakis, is kind of prototypical of many other feudal castles that you would have found, at least in northern Europe. And as we move into chapter 2, you'll see that we're set specifically in June of 1220. And actually the chapter begins with this quote: "The castle makes the feudal age possible." And that is true. The castle was the kind of center of culture. Physically, it was usually the center of these feudal estates. There would have been a lot of difference, though, between this. This was kind of this description we have of the castle is kind of an in-between castle. It's neither super rich nor one of the lesser palaces or some of these manor houses. The aristocrats wouldn't have been all that wealthy. They would have been much better off than their serfs living under them, but they were, their castles wouldn't have seemed that charming to us today. So in chapter 2, you can read about the ring of fortifications, the donjon, which is that main tower fortification, not what we think of as a dungeon. The Barbican, this is the first of the defensive landworks. The equestrian training grounds, the places that kind of the corral for training horses, working with horses. Then there's this signorial hall itself. That's the Lord's Hall, of course. Keep in mind that this is the era before our kind of revolution in modern manners and table manners. For example, banquets wouldn't have looked like our fancy banquets today, with bones being discarded in the corner. The table manners were not really invented as we think of them until really the Palace of Versailles in France in the 16 and 1700s. And you can see that as you move on to chapter 3 in the textbook, that there are lots of entertainments at this time as well. The other parts of culture, our idea of popular entertainment didn't really exist at this time, of course, but they had, especially if you had time enough to be bored was seen as a great privilege. One of the things about being an aristocrat was to never rush, to to simply repose, to sit and appreciate. That was part of the lifestyle of a noble person. We don't really have at this time a strong middle, what we would call today a middle class. In this feudal pyramid, we have the three estates. We have the first estate, those who are closest to God, the clergy, and then we have the second estate, or the second order, that is the aristocrat. And then we have below them everybody else. Now, sometimes the everybody else, what's known as the third estate or the third order, those people could be quite wealthy. They could be the merchants and the traders, and sometimes they could even be more wealthy than some of those aristocrats, those poor aristocrats. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so I'm not going to go through any of the details here in chapter 3 about the various dice playing and chess and the different entertainments, and the falconry. I think that was particularly interesting. But I'll leave it with that at that for today, and I'll post another brief lecture on chapter 1 in your textbook as well. So hope you got something out of this. If you want to listen to it again and jot down a few of the notes, that would be a good idea. Thank you.
16. Stop taking